The December wind cut through Sarah's thin jacket like a blade, carrying with it the scent of snow and the sharp bite of coming winter. She pulled her 7-year-old daughter Emma closer as they huddled together on the steps of the abandoned storefront, their breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The cardboard beneath them did little to block the cold seeping up from the concrete, but it was all they had. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Emma whispered, her small voice barely audible over the wind whistling through the alley. Sarah's heart clenched as she looked down at her daughter's pale face, the dark circles under her eyes a testament to too many nights of restless sleep and too few meals. They had been living on the streets for 3 weeks now, ever since the eviction notice had finally been enforced and their belongings thrown onto the sidewalk. The shelter had been full, and Sarah's pride had kept her from calling her sister, who had made it clear years ago that Sarah's choices were her own to live with. "I know, sweetheart," Sarah murmured, pressing a kiss to Emma's forehead. "We'll figure something out." The rumble of a motorcycle engine echoed off the brick walls of the narrow alley, growing louder as it approached their makeshift shelter. Sarah instinctively pulled Emma closer, her body tensing as memories of her ex-husband's violent friends flashed through her mind. She had learned to be wary of men who announced their presence with loud engines and leather jackets. The bike slowed as it passed their alcove, then stopped altogether. Heavy boots hit the pavement with a solid thud, and Sarah found herself looking up at a mountain of a man. He wore the distinctive leather vest of a motorcycle club, patches and insignia declaring his allegiance to a world she didn't understand. His graying beard was neatly trimmed, and despite his intimidating size, his eyes held a gentleness that surprised her. "You ladies all right?" His voice was gravelly, but not unkind, carrying the weight of someone who had seen enough of the world's harsh realities to recognize them in others. Sarah's first instinct was to lie, to smile and say they were fine, waiting for someone. But Emma's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, and the stranger's expression softened further. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked, crouching down to bring himself closer to their level. The movement revealed a walking stick hooked to his belt, and Sarah noticed the slight favoring of his left leg. "We're managing," Sarah said quietly, though her voice betrayed the exhaustion she felt down to her bones. The man studied them for a moment, his weathered features thoughtful. "Name's Rex," he said simply. "And I'm guessing you've been managing for a while now." He glanced at their small pile of belongings, the worn blanket, the way Emma clung to a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. Something in his tone, perhaps the complete absence of judgment or pity, made Sarah's carefully constructed walls crack slightly. "I'm Sarah. This is Emma." Rex nodded slowly, his gaze shifting between mother and daughter. "Well, Sarah and Emma, I was just heading to grab some dinner. Place around the corner makes a mean burger and fries. You interested in joining an old biker for a meal?" Emma's eyes lit up at the mention of food, but Sarah hesitated. Years of bad experiences had taught her to be suspicious of men offering help, especially men who looked like they could break her in half without effort. "I don't want charity," she said, lifting her chin despite the exhaustion weighing her down. Rex's weathered face creased into what might have been a smile. "Who said anything about charity? I'm talking about dinner between strangers. Sometimes a man gets tired of eating alone." He paused, studying her face. "Besides, looks to me like you could use a friend, and I happen to be between conversations." There was something in his voice, a loneliness that echoed her own, that made Sarah's decision for her. Emma needed food, and Sarah's pride, while fierce, wasn't worth more than her daughter's health. "All right," she said quietly, "but just dinner." Rex nodded and stood, offering his hand to help her up. His grip was calloused and strong, but gentle as he assisted both her and Emma to their feet. "Just dinner," he agreed. The diner was warm and bright, a stark contrast to the cold alley they had left behind. Rex chose a booth in the back corner, positioning himself where he could see the door, while ensuring Sarah and Emma had the more comfortable seats. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, approached their table with a welcoming smile. "Evening, Rex." "The usual?" she asked, then turned her attention to Sarah and Emma with the same warm demeanor. "Make it 3 of the usual, Martha," Rex said. "And maybe some hot chocolate for the little one." Emma's eyes grew wide at the mention of hot chocolate, and Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. It had been so long since she had been able to give her daughter such simple pleasures. "With extra marshmallows," Martha said with a wink at Emma, who giggled for the first time in weeks. As they waited for their food, Rex leaned back in the booth, his large frame somehow managing to appear less intimidating in the warm light of the diner. "So, what brings you and Emma to my neighborhood?" he asked, his tone conversational rather than prying. Sarah found herself answering more honestly than she had intended. The words came slowly at first, then faster, as Rex listened without interruption or judgment. She told him about her husband's drinking, the escalating violence, the night she had finally taken Emma and left with nothing but the clothes on their backs. She spoke of the job she had lost when Emma got sick and she couldn't find reliable childcare, the eviction that followed, the shelter that was always full. "Takes courage to leave," Rex said when she finished, his voice carrying a weight of understanding. "Takes even more to keep going when everything goes sideways." "I don't feel very courageous," Sarah admitted, watching Emma color on the paper placemat with crayons Martha had brought over. "Courage isn't about not being scared," Rex replied, his eyes following her gaze to Emma. "It's about doing what needs doing despite being scared. You've been doing that every day for 3 weeks. Their food arrived, and Sarah watched in amazement as Emma attacked her burger with an enthusiasm that made her heart ache. When had her daughter last had a proper meal? When had Sarah herself last tasted food that wasn't stale or salvaged? "Tell me about yourself," Sarah said, needing to shift the focus away from her own circumstances. "What's your story?" Rex chuckled, a low rumble that seemed to emanate from deep in his chest. "Not much to tell. Rode with the club for most of my adult life, saw some things, did some things I'm not particularly proud of, got shot in the leg about 5 years back, slowed me down some." He gestured to the walking stick propped against the booth. "These days, I mostly just fix bikes and try to stay out of trouble." "And do you?" "Stay out of trouble. I mean, most days," Rex said with a grin that suggested the opposite, "though trouble has a way of finding me regardless." Emma looked up from her coloring, her small face serious. "Are you a bad man?" Sarah's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but Rex laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "That's a fair question, little lady. I've done some bad things in my time, but I try to do more good things now. What do you think? Do I seem like a bad man to you?" Emma studied him with the intense focus that only children possessed, taking in his leather vest, his graying beard, his weathered hands. "Bad men don't buy dinner for hungry people," she said finally, returning to her coloring with the matter settled in her young mind. "Smart kid," Rex said to Sarah, his voice warm with approval. As the evening wore on, Sarah found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. Rex had a gift for putting people at ease, despite his intimidating appearance. He told Emma stories about the places he had traveled, describing desert sunsets and mountain views with the poetry of someone who had truly seen the world. He listened to Sarah's concerns about finding work and housing with the attention of someone who understood that sometimes being heard was as important as being helped. When it came time to leave, Rex insisted on walking them back to their spot in the alley. The temperature had dropped further, and Sarah could see their breath in the glow of the streetlights. "This ain't right," Rex said quietly as they approached the cardboard and blankets that constituted their home. "Nobody should be sleeping rough in weather like this, especially not a little girl." "The shelter's full," Sarah said, the familiar weight of helplessness settling on her shoulders. "We're on the waiting list, but there's no telling when something will open up." Rex was quiet for a long moment, his breath creating small clouds in the frigid air. "I got a garage apartment," he said finally. "Nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry. You're welcome to it for the night." Sarah's instinctive wariness flared. "I told you I don't want charity. And I told you I don't give charity." Rex replied, his tone patient but firm. "I'm offering a warm place to sleep to a woman and her daughter who need it. Tomorrow you can go back to being proud. Tonight, let yourself be practical." Emma tugged on Sarah's sleeve, her small face turned up expectantly. "Please, Mommy? I'm so cold." Looking down at her daughter's hopeful expression, Sarah felt her resistance crumble. What kind of mother put pride before her child's safety and comfort? "Just for tonight," she said quietly. "Just for tonight," Rex agreed. The garage apartment was small but clean, with a Murphy bed that folded down from the wall, a tiny kitchenette, and a bathroom with a shower that looked like heaven to Sarah's tired eyes. Rex showed them how the heater worked, pointed out clean towels and blankets, and left a bag of groceries on the small counter. "There's a phone if you need anything," he said, pointing to an old rotary model on the nightstand. "My number's written on the pad next to it." "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rex paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "Because someone did it for me once, when I needed it, and because that little girl of yours deserves to sleep somewhere warm and safe." After he left, Sarah ran a hot shower while Emma explored every corner of their temporary sanctuary. The water was scalding and wonderful, washing away weeks of accumulated grime and exhaustion. When she emerged, she found Emma already asleep on the couch. The stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in her arms, her face peaceful for the first time in weeks. Sarah pulled the Murphy bed down and gently transferred her daughter to the soft mattress, tucking the clean blankets around her small form. For the first time in 3 weeks, she allowed herself to truly relax, to believe that perhaps tomorrow might bring better things than today had. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside their small refuge, mother and daughter slept soundly, warm and safe and fed. The next morning arrived gray and cold, with the promise of snow heavy in the air. Sarah woke to the smell of coffee drifting through the small apartment and the sound of Emma's laughter from the kitchenette. She found her daughter sitting at the tiny table, a bowl of cereal in front of her and a smile on her face that Sarah hadn't seen in far too long. "Rex brought breakfast," Emma announced, holding up a spoonful of colorful cereal. "And he said there's eggs and bread, too, if you want to make toast." Sarah looked around the apartment, noting the grocery bag on the counter that definitely hadn't been there the night before. "When did he come by?" "This morning, while you were still sleeping. He was very quiet, but I heard him anyway. He said to tell you that friends help friends, and that arguing about it would just waste time that could be better spent eating breakfast." Despite herself, Sarah smiled. It seemed Rex had anticipated her objections and headed them off before she could voice them. She made toast and eggs while Emma chattered about the dreams she'd had in the warm bed, dreams of puppies and playgrounds and all the things a 7-year-old should be thinking about instead of where her next meal would come from. They were finishing breakfast when a knock came at the door. Sarah opened it to find Rex standing there with a thermos of coffee and what looked like classified ads from the newspaper. "Morning," he said, offering her the thermos. "Thought you might want to take a look at these." He handed her the folded pages, which she could see were marked with red circles around various job listings. "You didn't have to," Sarah began, but Rex held up a weathered hand. "We established last night that I don't do things I don't want to do," he said with a grin. "Besides, I know most of the businesses in this area. Figured I could make some introductions." Sarah looked down at the carefully marked advertisements, noting that Rex had circled positions that wouldn't require specialized training or extensive experience. Jobs that would allow for flexible hours to accommodate Emma's school schedule. "There's a waitressing position at Martha's Diner," Rex continued, gesturing to one of the circles. "She mentioned last night that they've been short-staffed. Good tips, flexible hours, and Martha's people look after each other." "I've never waitressed before," Sarah said, though she could hear the hope creeping into her voice. "You've been a mother for 7 years," Rex replied. "That means you can juggle multiple tasks, stay calm under pressure, and deal with demanding customers. Pretty much the same skill set." Emma looked up from her cereal, her eyes bright with excitement. "Does this mean we might get to stay here?" Rex and Sarah exchanged glances over her head. "Well," Rex said slowly, That depends on a lot of things, but there's no reason we can't take it one day at a time and see what happens. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by the kindness of this gruff stranger who had appeared in their lives like some sort of guardian angel in leather and denim. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet," Rex replied with a wink. "Wait until you see if Martha actually hires you. She's tougher than she looks." 2 hours later, Sarah found herself standing in front of Martha's diner, smoothing down her best blouse and trying to calm her racing heart. Emma was back at the apartment, content to color and play with the small collection of toys Rex had somehow produced from his seemingly endless supply of thoughtful gestures. The interview was surprisingly straightforward. Martha was indeed tough, asking pointed questions about Sarah's availability and reliability, but there was a warmth in her eyes that suggested she had already made her decision before Sarah had even walked through the door. "Rex says you're good people," Martha said finally, pouring 2 cups of coffee and sliding one across the counter to Sarah. "Rex doesn't say that about many folks, so I'm inclined to trust his judgment. You can start tomorrow morning if you want. 7 to 3 shift, Wednesdays through Sundays. Tips are good, and I pay above minimum wage." "Fair enough?" Sarah nodded, afraid to speak for fear that her voice would betray the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. A job, a real job with real pay and the possibility of rebuilding their lives. "There's just one thing," Martha continued, her expression growing serious. "You got a place to stay? Because I don't hire people who don't have stable housing. Can't have employees showing up tired and distracted because they spent the night wondering where they're going to sleep." Sarah's heart sank. She had been honest about her circumstances during the interview, but hearing it stated so bluntly reminded her of how precarious their situation really was. "She's got a place," came a familiar gravelly voice from behind her. Sarah turned to see Rex settling onto a stool at the counter, his walking stick propped against his knee. Garage apartment's been empty too long anyway. Needs someone to keep it from getting stale. "Rex," Sarah began, but he shook his head. "We'll work out the details later," he said firmly. "Right now, what matters is that Martha knows you've got reliable housing and can show up for work every day." Martha looked between them with the shrewd eyes of someone who had seen enough of life to recognize both kindness and desperation when she saw them. "All right, then," she said finally. "Welcome aboard, Sarah. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 7 sharp." As they walked back toward Rex's garage, Sarah felt as though she were moving through a dream. 24 hours ago, she and Emma had been homeless and hopeless, facing the prospect of another night on the streets in freezing weather. Now Emma was safe and warm, Sarah had a job, and they had a place to live, even if it was only temporary. "Why?" she asked Rex as they reached the garage. "Why are you doing all this for strangers?" Rex was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. "You really want to know?" Sarah nodded, and Rex gestured for her to follow him up the stairs to the apartment. Emma was where they had left her, curled up on the small sofa with her coloring books, humming softly to herself. "About 15 years ago," Rex began, settling into the chair across from the sofa, "I was in a real bad place. Drinking too much, fighting too much, making enemies faster than I could count them. One night, I got jumped outside a bar in Phoenix. 3 guys with knives and a real, serious grudge." He paused, his hand unconsciously moving to his ribs, where Sarah could now see the faint outline of old scars beneath his t-shirt. "I was lying in an alley, bleeding, and pretty sure I was going to die, when this old woman found me. Couldn't have weighed more than 90 pounds soaking wet, but she dragged me to her car and drove me to the hospital. Sat with me while they stitched me up, even though I was a stranger and probably looked like exactly the kind of person her mother warned her about." Emma looked up from her coloring, listening intently to the story. "When I asked her why she helped me, you know what she said?" Rex continued, his voice soft with memory. "She said, because everybody deserves a second chance, and sometimes we all need a hand up to take it. Turned out her son had been in a motorcycle club, got killed in a fight over something stupid. She said helping me was her way of helping him, even though it was too late." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, understanding now the deeper current beneath Rex's gruff kindness. "That woman saved my life in more ways than one," Rex said, his gaze meeting Sarah's. "Not just the medical attention, but the reminder that people could be good to each other without expecting anything in return. Changed the way I looked at the world and at myself." "What happened to her?" Emma asked, setting down her crayon. "She died about 5 years later," Rex said gently. "Cancer. But before she passed, she made me promise something. She said I had to pass it on, had to be someone else's second chance when the opportunity came up." He smiled at Emma, then looked back at Sarah. "What if I let you down? What if I can't make it work?" Sarah asked. "Then you try again," Rex said simply. "That's what second chances are for, trying until you get it right." The sound of motorcycle engines rumbling to life in the street below caught their attention. Rex glanced toward the window, his expression shifting slightly. "Expecting company?" Sarah asked, noting the change in his demeanor. Rex moved to the window and looked down at the street, where a small convoy of motorcycles was pulling up to the curb. Sarah joined him, her heart sinking as she counted the riders. 5 bikes, 10 riders, all wearing the same leather vests as Rex, all looking up at the apartment with expressions she couldn't read. "Club meeting I forgot about," Rex said, but something in his tone suggested that wasn't entirely true. "They probably just want to make sure I'm not getting soft in my old age." Sarah felt Emma move to stand beside her and instinctively put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. The riders below were dismounting, their movements coordinated and purposeful in a way that made Sarah's stomach clench with familiar anxiety. "Maybe Emma and I should leave," Sarah said quietly. "Give you privacy for your meeting." "No," Rex said firmly, his hand touching her shoulder. "You stay right here. They want to meet you anyway." "Meet us?" Sarah's voice came out higher than she intended. "Why would they want to meet us?" Rex's weathered face creased into what might have been a smile. "Because word travels fast in a small community, and when one of us starts playing guardian angel, the rest of us tend to take notice." The sound of heavy boots on the wooden stairs filled the small apartment, growing louder as the group approached. Sarah pulled Emma closer, her mind racing with possibilities, none of them particularly comforting. She had heard stories about motorcycle clubs, about loyalty and violence and codes she didn't understand. A knock came at the door, though it sounded more like a polite announcement than a demand for entry. Rex moved to answer it, his gait relaxed and unhurried, despite the tension Sarah could feel radiating from the group outside. "Afternoon, boys," Rex said as he opened the door, revealing a cluster of leather-clad figures that seemed to fill the entire doorway. "This is Sarah and Emma." The man at the front of the group was tall and lean, with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail and eyes that missed nothing. He stepped into the apartment with the confidence of someone accustomed to command, his gaze taking in Sarah and Emma before settling on Rex. "Marcus," Rex said by way of introduction. "Meet the ladies I was telling you about." Marcus nodded to Sarah, his expression neutral but not unkind. "Ma'am," he said simply, then looked down at Emma with something that might have been softness. "Miss Emma." Emma, displaying the fearlessness that only children possessed, looked up at the intimidating figure and waved. "Hi," she said brightly, apparently unimpressed by the leather and patches and general aura of controlled danger that surrounded the group. "Rex says you've had some rough times lately," Marcus continued, addressing Sarah directly. "Says you could use some friends." Sarah nodded uncertainly, unsure of the protocol for this situation or what response was expected of her. "Thing is," Marcus went on, moving further into the apartment as the rest of the group filed in behind him, "Rex is one of ours. Has been for 23 years. When someone messes with one of ours, they mess with all of us. But it works the other way, too. When one of ours decides someone's worth protecting, well," he gestured to the assembled riders, "that someone gets the protection of the whole family." Sarah looked around the apartment, suddenly aware that she and Emma were surrounded by a dozen men who could probably end her existence without breaking a sweat, but who were looking at them with expressions of curiosity rather than threat. "I don't understand," Sarah said quietly. "It's simple," said another rider, this one shorter and stockier than Marcus, with intricate tattoos covering his forearms. Rex vouches for you. We vouch for you. Someone gives you trouble, they give all of us trouble. But I'm nobody, Sarah protested. I'm just a waitress who can't even keep a roof over her daughter's head. You're wrong about that, Rex said gently, moving to stand beside her. You're someone who's been knocked down but keeps getting back up. You're someone who puts her child's needs before her own pride. You're someone worth protecting. Marcus nodded his agreement. We've been asking around about your situation, he said, and Sarah felt a flicker of alarm. Turns out your ex-husband's been spreading some stories about you around town, telling people you're unstable, unreliable, making it hard for you to find work or housing. Sarah's cheeks burned with shame and anger. Even now, even after she had escaped his violence, Derek was still finding ways to hurt her and Emma. Well, Marcus continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. Derek's going to be having a conversation with some of our members later today. We're going to explain to him why it would be in his best interest to stop spreading lies about you. We're also going to explain, added the tattooed writer, why it would be very unhealthy for him to come anywhere near you or Emma ever again. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes, overwhelmed by the fierce protectiveness of these strangers who had just entered her life. You don't have to do that, she whispered. Yes, we do, Marcus said simply, because Rex asked us to, and because it's the right thing to do. Emma, who had been listening to the conversation with the intense focus of a child, trying to understand the adult world, tugged on Rex's sleeve. Are you like superheroes? She asked seriously. The question broke the tension in the room, and several of the writers chuckled. Rex knelt down to Emma's level, his weathered face gentle. Not superheroes, little lady, he said. Just people who believe in looking out for each other. Like a family? Emma pressed. Exactly like a family, Marcus confirmed, his stern expression softening as he looked at the small girl. And families protect each other. Over the next hour, Sarah found herself in the surreal position of having coffee and conversation with a dozen members of a motorcycle club who had apparently decided that she and Emma were now under their collective protection. They were not at all what she had expected based on media portrayals and her own prejudices. Tommy, the tattooed writer, turned out to be a father of 3 who worked as a mechanic and coached Little League baseball. Jake, a quiet man with prematurely gray hair, was a veteran who ran a non-profit helping homeless veterans find housing and jobs. Carlos spoke 3 languages and taught motorcycle safety courses at the local community college. They were plumbers and electricians, mechanics and small business owners, men who had found in their club the brotherhood and purpose that had been missing from their individual lives. They were also, Sarah realized, genuinely concerned about her and Emma's welfare in a way that went beyond mere obligation to Rex. There's something else, Marcus said as the gathering began to wind down. We took up a collection. Nothing fancy, just whatever the guys could spare. He handed Sarah an envelope that felt suspiciously thick. Should cover first month's rent and deposit on a proper apartment. Maybe some clothes for Emma. Sarah stared at the envelope, her throat tight with emotion. I can't take this, she managed. Sure you can, said Jake quietly. We've all been where you are, one way or another. Someone helped us when we needed it. Now it's our turn to help someone else. Besides, added Tommy with a grin, Rex said you were too proud to take charity, so we decided this wasn't charity. It's an investment. An investment in what? Sarah asked. In you, Marcus said simply. In the belief that sometimes good people just need a chance to prove it. As the writers began to leave, each one stopped to say goodbye to Emma, who had completely won them over with her easy acceptance and endless questions about their motorcycles. They promised to take her for a ride someday when her mother said it was okay, and to teach her about engines and mechanics if she was interested. Rex was the last to leave, pausing at the door to look back at Sarah and Emma sitting together on the small sofa. You all right? He asked, concerned by the overwhelmed expression on Sarah's face. I don't know how to process all this, Sarah admitted. Yesterday I thought we were going to freeze to death in an alley, and today I have a job, a place to live, and apparently the protection of an entire motorcycle club. It doesn't feel real. It's real, Rex assured her, and it's yours to keep as long as you want it. The only thing we ask in return is that someday, when you're back on your feet and life is good again, you remember what it felt like to need help. And when you see someone else who needs a hand up, you give them one. What if I mess it up? She asked. Then we'll help you clean up the mess and try again, Rex said with a smile. That's what families do. 3 months later, Sarah stood behind the counter at Martha's Diner, efficiently managing the morning rush with the skill of someone who had found her calling. Her tips were good, her hours were steady, and she had just signed the lease on a small 2-bedroom apartment 6 blocks away from the garage where she and Emma had found sanctuary. Emma was thriving, enrolled in a good school where her teachers praised her intelligence and curiosity. She had friends now, playdates and birthday parties, and all the normal childhood experiences that Sarah had feared they would never be able to provide. The motorcycle club had become an extended family, with Sunday dinners at various members' homes and group outings to the park or the lake. Emma called them her uncles and was spoiled accordingly, but never in a way that undermined Sarah's authority as her mother. Derek had indeed been visited by several club members and had apparently decided that relocating to another state was in his best interest. Sarah had received divorce papers 3 weeks later, along with a formal relinquishment of any parental rights. The chapter of her life that had been defined by fear and violence was finally closed. As she wiped down the counter during a lull in the morning rush, Sarah reflected on the chain of events that had brought her to this moment. One act of kindness from a stranger had changed everything, creating ripples that continued to spread outward in ways she was still discovering. The bell above the diner door chimed, and Sarah looked up to see a young woman enter, with 2 small children in tow. The woman's clothes were wrinkled and ill-fitting, her eyes darting nervously around the restaurant as though she expected to be asked to leave. The children pressed close to her sides, their faces showing the hollow look that Sarah recognized all too well. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked gently, moving around the counter to approach the family. "I was wondering," the woman said hesitantly, "if you might have any leftover food? I can work for it, clean tables or wash dishes or whatever you need. My kids haven't eaten since yesterday." Sarah felt her heart clench with recognition and memory. She glanced toward the kitchen, where Martha was visible through the pass-through window, and caught the older woman's eye. Martha nodded almost imperceptibly, understanding passing between them without words. "Actually," Sarah said, turning back to the young mother, "we just happened to make too much breakfast this morning. It'll just go to waste if someone doesn't eat it. Would you and your children like to help us out with that?" The woman's eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude, and Sarah gently guided the family to a booth in the back corner, the same one where Rex had taken her and Emma all those months ago. As she poured coffee for the woman and hot chocolate for the children, Sarah thought about the envelope hidden in her locker, the one labeled emergency fund, that she had been quietly building from her tips. She thought about the spare room in her new apartment and the extra blankets she kept in the hall closet. She thought about second chances and the responsibility that came with them. The wheel had come full circle, and Sarah was ready to be someone else's guardian angel.